following podcast is recorded and produced by Emerge, a media creators co-op, in affiliation with the network at bicbp-radio.com.
Question: who is lying to you today? The media? Social media? Big business? Politicians? Actually, it's probably all of them. That led me to create this podcast named They're All Lying to Us. We do research and present findings and opinions on political, social, and cultural topics to inform our communities about what's really going on. You know, stuff that affects everyday American life. We also invite you to share your voice and help us recreate real-life interactions as they were had in the pre-digital era. I'm your host for these conversations. My name is Andy. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another podcast of They're All Lying to Us, or TALUS as we call it for short. It's early April here, just a few days in, so this is not an April Fool's joke, though. It is April 3rd. We are past April Fools and all that silliness. In any event, today's topic, which is the blog that you can also find on our website, www.lyingtous.com. And this week's topic is entitled why liberal media struggles to reach regular Americans. And as a backdrop to that, we're going to use a little case study from the past few weeks about the former Republican National Committee Chair, Ronna McDaniel, and how she was hired and then summarily dismissed from NBC News within the matter of a few days. So, without further ado, let me head into the meat of the topic today. On March 22nd, NBC News hired former RNC head Romney McDaniel. Her middle name is Romney. She uses her maiden name. And they named her as a political commentator for NBC News. Then the talking heads of NBC publicly objected. NBC leadership then changed their mind and sent Ronna on her way. The entire fiasco got me thinking, was Ronna getting shot down by MSNBC elites just another example of a bigger problem with liberal media? Namely, they just can't reach regular Americans like Fox News can. So essentially, NBC told Ronna McDaniel, after they had hired her on March 22nd, by March 26th, they had told her, "You're fired." Ronna McDaniel may have gotten fired faster than any Donald Trump apprentice. So who is Ronna Romney McDaniel? She's the niece of Mitt Romney, and McDaniel has served as the head of the Republican National Committee, RNC, from 2017 until March 8th, 2024, just a few weeks ago. She reportedly stepped down from the RNC, though she herself indicated that Donald Trump wanted her to, quote, move aside, unquote. Since it is an entirely entertaining little tale, let's summarize the recent events surrounding NBC's hiring and subsequent firing of Ronna McDaniel. On Friday, March 22nd, 2024, NBC News announced that they would hire McDaniel as a political analyst. On Sunday, March 24th, McDaniel appeared as a guest on NBC's Meet the Press. This was an appearance scheduled before she had been hired, so I suppose she was just going to be on there as sort of a Republican or RNC head or somebody about to depart the RNC. I'm not really sure, but this was not really part of her job duties yet. So on that show, Meet the Press, when she was asked if she was pushed out of her role at the RNC by Donald Trump, McDaniel said, quote, "He absolutely wanted me to move aside and wanted Michael Whatley and Lara Trump to come in," unquote. When the conversation came to the 2020 election and its aftermath, McDaniel said, quote, "I want to be very clear. The violence that happened on January 6th, or the persons who committed the violent acts on January 6th, should not be freed." She indicated that she intends to vote for Trump. Further questioning of McDaniel centered on her involvement in a phone call with Republican canvassers in Michigan. This was in the post-2020 election confusion when there was a debate as to whether or not Biden had won and all that other things. Some say artificially created by Trump, but that was kind of the time frame of this. And on the Meet the Press show a week ago Sunday, McDaniel confirmed that she had joined Trump on this call with Republican canvassers in Michigan. And this is when Trump allegedly pressured the canvassers not to certify the 2020 election results. McDaniel denied instructing them to take any specific action during the call. Ultimately, and contrary to the view of many Republicans, McDaniel said, "The reality is Joe Biden won. He's the president. He's a legitimate president. I have always said, and I continue to say, there were issues in 2020. I believe that both can be true." So this was on Meet the Press, and then she goes off stage, and the kind of the talkers on the show get together. So this is still right afterwards on the show, and then Chuck Todd, who's the NBC News chief political analyst, began questioning why NBC had hired her, citing to her credibility issues, primarily due to her involvement in post-2020 election challenge activities. So on Monday, March 25th, the decision to hire McDaniel continued to draw an intense backlash from both on-air journalists at NBC News and on-air personalities at NBC. Several popular MSNBC hosts, including Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Nicole Wallace, Joy Reid, Lawrence O'Donnell, and Morning Joe, or Joe Scarborough as we know him, publicly objected to her hiring. The following day, Tuesday, March 26th, NBC reversed its decision and announced that Ronna McDaniel would not be an NBC News contributor. So, one might think that this looks like MSNBC's talking heads reinforcing their own media bubble. Now, polls show that about 1/3 of American adults do not believe that Joe Biden was legitimately elected president in 2020. While the percentage that believe the 2020 election was rigged is far less than the 82% claimed by Donald Trump just a few days ago, there might be 70 million or more Americans who believe that the election was rigged. While some might argue that this is the result of conservatives being more likely to believe false information, possibly due to being in an information bubble, it does not change the fact that there's a large portion of America that's involved in this belief. And I, for one, as verified by the fact that I started this blog and podcast in response to information overload and misleading information, believe that outlets like MSNBC still need to try to speak to that part of the population as well. Adding Ronna McDaniel as a contributor may have been an important step for MSNBC toward that goal. I have heard MSNBC personalities express their frustration with Trump supporters. They can't understand how people support Trump. Well, if MSNBC personalities truly have an intellectual curiosity and want to reach Trump supporters, whether to understand them or change their mind, then why not talk to McDaniel? McDaniel's responses on Meet the Press suggest she is not currently an election denier. She is still a Trump supporter. MSNBC personalities believe she was involved in questionable shenanigans to not certify the 2020 election results in Michigan. But don't they believe in giving people second chances? And don't forget, she was essentially an employee of Trump at the time. And unlike MSNBC personalities who apparently tell their bosses who to hire and fire, I'm pretty sure McDaniel had to go along with Trump's effort to some extent or face losing her job. The rest of us who work for overbearing or asshole bosses, or even nice bosses, understand that one doesn't always have the option of objecting to poor or unethical decisions at work. Ultimately, since McDaniel seemed like she was squeezed out of her job at the RNC, might it be a good time for NBC to say, hey, we accept you with all of your faults? In stark contrast, many Trump supporters accept him despite or even because of his faults. Well, what if McDaniel had stayed at NBC? She might have found Jesus in the good news preached by more liberal MSNBC intellectuals, and she may have been converted to a liberal leaning faith. If she didn't, they could have set her up as the whipping girl for her bad ideas. In the old days, when Fox News was fair and balanced, Sean Hannity had a punching bag as his subordinate co-host of Hannity and Combs. Combs would come on and get a minute to say his left-leaning piece, and then Hannity could use the next 10 minutes to shoot down Combs's wussy liberal ideas. Sure, I might be exaggerating a bit, but you get my point. MSNBC could have given the appearance of being fair and balanced by accepting McDaniel and perhaps widen their audience base as well. So another theory I have is that MSNBC talks to the highly educated, while Fox News talks to the working class. And actually, this just isn't a theory. It's sort of proved out by data evidence. Viewer demographics indeed suggest that MSNBC leans towards the highly educated. In 2019, one data source showed that MSNBC viewers skewed towards college graduates and advanced degree holders as compared to Fox News. When Fox News was started in the 1980s and 90s, many journalists believed that the goal of Fox News was to appeal to conservative audiences to address what Fox News founder Rupert Murdoch believed was a liberal bias among traditional news outlets. I submit that over time, Fox News has essentially become a populist channel. Now, populism is defined as a political approach that strives to appeal to ordinary people who feel that their concerns are disregarded by established elite groups. By this definition, it may well appear that Fox News sees MSNBC as one of the elite groups failing to address the concerns of ordinary people. In television terms, this results in the working class finding Fox News more appealing than MSNBC. NBC's decision to fire Ronna McDaniel further aggravates this issue for liberal-leaning outlets like MSNBC. While Morning Joe host Joe Scarborough asked Trump supporters, "What's wrong with you people?" he apparently did not want the opportunity to ask one of them, namely McDaniel, on his show. So that's kind of the status of what happened here with this situation. And I think I've hinted at my opinion that maybe MSNBC should have handled this slightly differently, and NBC. And it's a little bit frustrating in today's environment of one side versus the other, red versus blue, and too much information, let alone misinformation and disinformation that we're fed, and being inside media bubbles. Maybe it would be nice if we had one source that was a little bit more welcoming to all ideas. I think it rings a little bit. It just doesn't seem right that MSNBC doesn't consider this in some circumstances and doesn't take on viewers or commentators who might not fully agree with their position. But when there's such a big number of people in the population who think along the lines that McDaniel might think, it might be a good idea to talk to those people. So that's kind of the basis of my opinion, and I'll follow up a little bit more. But before we do, I'm going to take a pause, and we're going to head into the download section of the podcast. Okay, welcome back, and welcome again to They're All Lying to Us. We're into the download section, and normally my producer, Rich, is the person that I bring on at this time, but Rich has abandoned us temporarily for a vacation in no other wonderful place than Italy. So I hope he got in to see a soccer game while he was there. And I've already known by checking out Facebook that he's already eaten a lot of pizza. So hopefully Rich is having a really good break. In his absence, I have the good fortune of having Jacob join us as well. Jacob is filling in as the producer for this episode. He is also, like me and Rich, a Niagara Falls, New York native. And he has his very own podcast called the Tank Talk Podcast, which he focuses on much more easier issues than we do. And I kind of think that maybe I'd want to do his podcast other than this one because it sounds like a lot more fun. But his focus is on sports, especially on the NFL. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Tank to They're All Lying to Us. Tank, you there?
Hey Andy, what's going on? Thanks for having me on.
Good, brother, and glad to have you here. So, you know, Rich and I are of the same age. We graduated from high school at the same time, and we're not of identical, kind of political makeup or anything like that. But we do have a lot in common by our backgrounds. I really am glad that I have an opportunity to talk with somebody and bring somebody else on who has a different generational approach. You being a much more recent high school graduate and college graduate and such, and it's really helpful. And also, to me, part of the point of this podcast and the blogging that I do and things like that is to try to distill some of these issues that are out there that you might glance at your phone and get a feed on it from somewhere or see it in the headlines or happen to be clicking through the TV or something comes through your social media feed, and you may incidentally do these things because you're not 100% geared into it. And I think that's probably where most people are.
Sure.
And that's a good thing probably for your sanity, to not get too deep into it. And that's not part of the, while we want to talk to people who are dealing with these issues a lot and spend a lot of time focused on things that are going on in social and political ways across the country and the world, it's very important to me to bring on, kind of just regular people who aren't focused on this stuff, because I think MSNBC kind of loses their touch with everyday people and the way they think about things, and they don't have an opportunity to talk to what they might consider the other side. It's I think it's a big part of what's gone wrong in our society, that we don't have these opportunities to bring together people that, even if you're from different backgrounds, political backgrounds, in this case, we have common geography and history, but history that way that's shared, but we're from a different generation. So we live the world differently. We see the world a little bit differently. And it's always good to think about these things and talk with people, because I think, doesn't somebody usually say you learn a lot more by listening to people than you do about talking to them? So with that in mind, I'm glad that you're here, and I'll just throw it open for a second if you want to give any further introduction to yourself or your podcast or anything about yourself, or if you want to start talking a little bit about the topic that I brought up today, which is kind of this liberal media and strange circumstance with Ronna McDaniel.
For sure, Andy. So you said pretty much, let me give you a little glimpse of what life is like on the other side here from a different generation's perspective. So like you said, essentially, but it's a different world now. So and even though we're from similar places on the geography map, like I definitely see things from a different perspective. I grew up a different way than you and Rich, so to say. But before we get into a little bit of that, just give a little background on myself. So I'm Tank Lettieri. I also have a podcast here under the Emerge umbrella. As Andy mentioned, the Tank Talk podcast. We focus a lot. We're a sports podcast, mainly focused on NFL topics, but pretty much anything going on, any happenings in the sports world, we're more than open to covering. As you know, like a lot of, even though like you mentioned, like the different topics from my podcast compared to yours, ours might be a little more fun. So
I'm sure it is.
I feel like a lot of people lose sight that sports are meant to be fun. So that's our approach to sports coverage. because you tune into like ESPN and everything. They're starting to change a little bit by bringing the Pat McAfee show and his crew on. Uh,
Hmm.
Essentially, they started off as an internet show similar to us, covering sports from a different perspective. But all in all, you tune in to ESPN. Typically, you go in the suit and ties. Um, every topic is so serious. Everything is covered from an analytical standpoint. But sports are meant to be fun, man. So I think that's what we bring to the table.
Love
Um,
it.
we're not so-called experts or anything of that matter. We see things from a fan perspective. So we remind everybody out there, sports are meant to be fun. You can have fun with it. So we cover sports from I like to say comedic, informative standpoint,
Hmm.
and make it entertaining in it, man. Because all in all, that's what sports are all about.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy, I'm, outside of this thing, I might sound very serious, but I try to throw in a few things in there that are kind of silly, and so, the Trump you're fired thing, and that's more my natural
Sure.
kind of state, but it's so all this stuff is so sensitive that, when you don't know people well, it's hard to kind of let loose, cut loose on this stuff and be as funny as I'd like to be on these
For
on
sure,
this on
because
this thing. And
at the end of the day, and like I'm sure you could agree, you got to be human, and I feel like
yeah,
a lot of us lose sight of that.
yeah, oh yeah, no, absolutely, and that's what when I started doing this podcast and the blog associated with it, the big thing I talk about that is like this is about being human because we're maybe I'm the old man telling you young kids to get off my lawn,
Get
but
off my
in
lawn.
but in today's day and age, we rely on the technology, and the
Mhm,
technology is serving to separate us, and it and because and we tend to talk to each other meaner through that technology, we don't really know people, and I think when you get to know people a little bit more and you have it more as a casual conversation, it enables that being funny part as well, and humanizes the other person, so you're not going to be as mean to them.
mhm.
You're not going to be as judgmental if I say the wrong politically incorrect words, which my daughters college age daughters want to correct me on,
Mhm.
when I do use proper words. There were words that were fine to use in my generation and beyond that are no longer proper. So
But
I like
still,
to,
from that perspective, sorry to cut you off, but even like then, it's like you say one thing a different way, but we say it a different way today, but it could mean the same thing. So I definitely see what you mean by that.
right. Well, part of that with the kind of leaning a little bit into the topic of today, I admittedly have a little bit of a and I'm not, I mean, I'm not a Fox News fan either or what
Mhm.
have you. It's just that when I see these things happen, it just strikes me as that condescending sort of superior intellectual thing. And I have a couple college degrees of my own, but maybe they're not good enough for the other people. But for the likes of the intellectuals that dominate certain parts of our media, and maybe I didn't go to the right schools. Um, to get there. But it's just it's this kind of thing where they're doing one thing, they're talking about being more democratic and doing these other things, but it seems somewhat condescending, and it seems selective, and individually. I borrow this line from I can't remember who actually, it may have been another sports talk guy. I don't know if it was Colin Coward or not, but he said something about people who shower at the end of the day rather than at the beginning of the day, and I'm more of the former, where I like to hang out with people who shower at the end of the day. In
Mhm.
other words, afterwards they have like a job where they use their hands and they get sweaty and they do that stuff, because all the pompous bullshit of you know kind of overly intellectual folks isn't my cup of tea. I don't find it fun. You know what you said about fun and
Yeah.
human? I don't
Mhm.
find it fun and human. It's more of this kind of this combat to see who's the smartest of the nerd, king of the nerd hill or whatever it is.
Sort of
Um,
like a divide in a way.
yeah, it is. I always felt like it was living, we lived in two different places. When I moved away from Western New York, and I was having some professional success, and my wife as well, so we kind of got a bigger house and stuff. We lived in near Atlanta, and so I was the one house that still had, true to my Italian roots, we still had I still had my tomato plants in the backyard and all
Oh
that
yeah.
other kind of stuff. And and one of the friends from my wife's work came over, and he referred to us sort of as the Beverly Hillbillies of our neighborhood, because because we did all those things, right?
Uh-huh.
We still took pride, and we enjoyed those things, and our conversations. When I have fun conversations and I'm doing the things that I want to do, I can talk about these things with people, but it has to be the right, I need people to be looser, because when it gets really wound and really tight, it's not very comfortable.
Not
So I,
not
I
at all.
agree. I agree with everything you say. And it's kind of taking it on my personal challenge to make these kind of topics. Number one, they have to be, you have to be talking about them.
Right.
And number two, make them more human and fun when you're doing it. And at the end of the day, you have a good argument with somebody, even if it's about some stupid topic, and then you shake hands, go have a beer, and say, like nothing happened.
Yep.
Today's day and
And
age, it's
yeah.
it's like a a
It's like
bloodbath, like
it's almost,
Gladiator,
yeah, it's almost like my way or the highway essentially. And I think
right?
that's one thing that I mean, there's pros and cons of the internet, but one of the biggest cons is that like without how algorithms are set up, like it's designed for like your personal basis and your ways of thinking,
Hmm.
that like let's say even just for me for an example, like on my X or Twitter feed, whatever you want to call it nowadays. I know Rich has a lot of fun with that topic. I'm sure you guys have touched
Yep.
on that. But
Yeah.
like I'm a Colts fan, like we kind of talked about before the recording. So since I'm kind of tuned into everything Colts, that's all my algorithm is going to show me. So that's all I know essentially.
Right.
And then every now and then, like let's say a Bills post pops up, and I either click on it for a while or I'll like the post. The algorithm will be like, oh, okay, he liked this Bills post. He spent a lot of time looking at it. Let's give him more Bills stuff then.
Right.
So, and I think that's one thing that's like a negative with the politics world, right? Even we've seen it, even just like I'm not huge on politics. I'm making it, let it be known right now. Biggest sports dude you could probably meet. I stay as far away from the politics as I possibly can, but you still got to address it some way, shape, or form. But
Yeah.
anywho, I still see it. So like even during like the 2020 election, right?
Mm.
Um, you sort of seen the divide there online, like the whole fake news and false misinformation stuff.
Yeah.
Um, agendas are set out and narratives are built for your way of thinking. So that's all you're going to see on your timeline, and that's all you're going to know and believe. And if you
Yeah.
see anything that goes against your ways of thinking, you don't want nothing to do with it. And I think, I mean, just even in sports talk, like for my show, for example, like I don't want like everyone to agree with me. Like, yes, that's good every now and then, but I want different viewpoints, and I want to know the way you're thinking about one certain thing. So maybe
Absolutely.
I could sort of think back and be like, okay, maybe I'm wrong about this topic. Let me see it from your perspective. But okay, I know what you mean by that, but I still don't agree with you. But I appreciate your reasoning behind it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely true. I I struggle almost to do these podcasts, because um, I spend a fair amount of time surveying things online. I try to watch. I don't like watching the programs, but I try to watch the few different programs, right? So like
Mhm.
news programs. So usually in the mornings, um, when I want to get my dose of abuse and what have you, I'll watch these morning shows from the different news,
Mhm.
cable news networks. And I'll watch Fox News for a while, and I'll get angry, and I'm just like, gosh, why can't they fix these things? And oh, those damn, why can't they fix this immigrant problem? Every day it's the immigrant problem,
Sure.
and I'm mad about that. And by the end of it, I'm ready to go grab a gun and defend the border and all that other stuff. And then I go watch the other channel, and it's like, oh my God, there's a this. geez, the stuff that Trump does is horrible and this thing. And it's like all this, and we're headed towards this abyss because he's going to, implement some non-democratic system and be like a dictator when he gets in and abuse all of us or something like that. And I'm like, oh, geez, what about that? Oh my God, now what do I do? And it's, and I'm kind of sitting here like in the middle of just sort of being like, well, yeah, I know this can be true and that, this can be true. But it's like another reference before your time, but when they're having riots in Los Angeles, and was it before? It may have been before. I don't know if it was related to, it may have been before. It was like race riots or something. I don't know if it was before or just after the OJ trial thing. I don't know. It was in that time frame in the 90s.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was like early 90s, right? Because I remember
early 90s. It was early 90s. OJ trial was like 93, I think, or something like that. And then they pulled this one black truck driver, Rodney King. They pulled him out of his truck and they were kicking the shit out of him.
Yep.
And at the end, he comes on after he had healed up some in the hospital, and he comes on kind of tearful and everything like that, just telling people, not because he was beaten up, just because he felt bad for the status of his little universe over there in Los Angeles. He's like, can't we all just get along?
Right.
So I always reference that. I'll say that a lot of times, even when I'm having, personal arguments with people I know or whatever. It's like, can't we all just get along? And that's kind of the point of my criticism here is of MSNBC, because I think they're doing a disservice to the rest of us. And I don't accuse them of having bad intentions.
Mm-hmm.
I think their intentions are probably in the right place. I think that they're just a little bit misplaced maybe in how they do it, or they might want to just give it another look and think about how to get, it's their responsibility to get both sides talking again. And this is, I always, my reference to Republicans and Democrats, or left and right, or red and blue, whatever.
This way, that way.
Analogy you want to do, whatever you want to do. It's like a marriage, right? And the husband and wife are fighting with each other, and they can't stand each other, and then they go talk to their friends and their family, and they gather up their own side against them, and then they'll gather the other side against them. And then it becomes, and then the only time that they can talk to each other is when they're screaming at each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes the foregone conclusion that they can never get along. And divorce is what necessarily ensues. And I think the worst part in that buildup to the breakdown, to the breakup, the ultimate breakup, is the part where everybody stops talking and they can't talk to each other at all without screaming. And I feel like we're at that point.
Definitely.
And that's why I put it on people like the people at NBC, MSNBC, and NBC to say, let me give you an example of how we talk to each other civilly as left and right, husband and wife, however it is. And this does not need to end in an argument. It doesn't need to end in a divorce. And that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely get your perspective there. And like, even just with the whole MSNBC, which great work by you with the blog article. One problem I see with that is just like, sort of like what I was just talking about a few minutes ago. Like like I may not agree with you with one thing, but you still need to like find a balance, right? Like I can't be surrounded with people that think just like me, because I'm not gonna see different perspectives and like see the other side of the fence in a way. Like when everything ties back to sports for me. So like even just for our show, for example, like Donnie, my co-host, shout out Donnie. He's a Brock Purdy hater. I'm sure you're familiar with Brock Purdy, the 49ers. He's just a system quarterback, this and that. Game manager is the new term that we'd like to use nowadays.
Right.
But I'm the complete opposite. I think he's a great quarterback. He fits perfect with the team. It's a team game. I mean, obviously the quarterback is the biggest position and most important position on the field, but so a lot of it falls back on them. But like, it's good to have those conversations. Like, just
Yeah.
understand where each one is coming from. Maybe what you say will maybe sway me a different way. Like, okay, maybe I didn't think about that. And I feel like that's sort of like one of the biggest problems that's going on with America right now. Now, I'm not saying I have the answers to any of these problems, but it's just the divide, man. Like, you look in NFL locker rooms, you see how diverse and where all these guys come from,
Right.
rich families, poor families. They're all there for the same exact goal, is to have success for the team, and the ultimate goal is the championship at the end of the year, right? So, and in
Right.
order to do that, you all have to be on the same page, whether you disagree one thing or not. You got to find a way to make it work. And right now, America needs to find a way to make it work.
Right. Well, and the other part of it is too, when you think about sports at all levels, when you pull back from it, you're on a team, and you're not the Democrat team or the Republican team, but you're on a
Yeah.
team, and you go into the game, you play hard, you play to win. And then how many times after the little league game, the little guys go slap each other's hands and say good game. It's part of the game. We did that in
Mhm.
high school baseball. You
Yep.
probably experienced that too. And even in the pros, you'll see the NFL players afterwards. It's regardless of, not a religious endorsement by any means, but a bunch of them might come together after a game, and they might kneel and pray or do whatever it is or something like that from both teams, and they come together and shake hands at the end of hockey playoff series the teams go through. And even
Mhm.
though they may have been fighting and slashing each other 5 minutes earlier and for 7 games, they're done with it. And that's so your sports analogy is really, as you said, about being human.
Mhm.
It's about life. It's you know we could use those examples of how it's handled in sports and other parts of life to try to figure out how to do it when it comes to these social and political issues that are driving a wedge between us.
Definitely, man. And it's like, you just, I feel like nowadays, like, you could, if you're not on one side or the other, then you're the enemy.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, how about, what if I just want to stand back, see both sides of the spectrum, and then maybe I agree with some things that this one side has.
Right.
I could. That doesn't mean I'm against this side. I can still agree with some of these takes. I could disagree with some of the takes on the other side, and I
Right.
could disagree with some takes from the other side as well. It's just like, you got
It's
to
hard to
use
be in the
that
middle.
judgment, right?
Yeah.
And I just feel like you're either this or that. You can't be nothing in between. And
Right.
if you're on that side, well, forget about you. I don't want to hear from you. But then if you're on my side, everything's all good. You know what I mean? So it's just like, it's more so, it's definitely like ego driven, and it's more divided than ever, I feel like.
Yeah, I hear you. So to finish up your part of it,
Mm.
what are the Colts doing in the off season? We're here, it's April, or we got the draft coming up in a few weeks. How
Hey,
are the
man.
Colts looking? Are they looking at that young quarterback Richardson as the guy, or
That,
what do you
you know
think?
what? That's what it's starting to look like. And I'll tell you what, especially with the news that broke today, I'm not sure when this podcast will hit the air. But today is April 3rd.
Yep.
And the Houston Texans officially won the offseason Super Bowl. So shout out Houston. You just won the offseason Super Bowl with all the additions you made. Today you traded for Stephon Diggs.
Now they
Colts,
got to go play.
now they got to go play.
Yeah.
Now you got to go actually win the real one.
Right.
So I'm joking, but it's just like Colts Nation, like on Twitter and everything. They're losing their minds. It's like, what did we do? Like, okay, yeah, Houston has the money. They're making the smart moves that's best for their team, and it's great. It looks awesome on paper, right?
Right.
They're all great players, and they got a bright future with, I mean, CJ Stroud having one of the best rookie seasons of all time last year.
Yeah.
And okay, they trade for Stephon Diggs today. They want our GM Chris Ballard fired. It's like,
Because of what he didn't do,
because of what he didn't do. Like, it.
and we don't
First
even know
off,
how it's going to work out.
exactly. So
'Cause
let's say,
nobody knows if the second half of the season when Diggs went in the toilet was just half of a season, or if that's his future.
exactly,
And if
and
that
it's like,
happens to be true, or he goes in there and is the poison pill in the locker room,
yeah, we just don't know. We
you
just
don't
don't know
know,
until it happens.
right?
So it's like, and I feel like the Colts fans lose sight of last season already. Like, Anthony Richardson played like 4 or 5 games, and through those 4 or 5 games, he played a lot more impressive than a lot of like NFL people imagine him to play with little college
I
experience.
watched him at Florida, and
Yeah.
I didn't think he was gonna, he's definitely a running quarterback, but I didn't
Mhm.
think he'd be, be able to be that successful. But he had more beyond the running. He looked, he looked like he belonged at least.
Definitely. He played quarterback, and I mean, he made
Yeah,
the right reason and
exactly.
everything, but essentially what I'm saying is like he goes down, we play with a backup quarterback the whole season. We're in the division race. Literally goes it week 18, last game of the season is the game for the division championship with a lot of losses that we had on our starting lineup with our franchise, essentially our franchise quarterback out. So it's like, and it came down to one play. I don't know if you tuned into that game or followed along, but
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember. Yeah,
they're
yeah,
f- they're 1 yard away from winning the
yes,
division,
yes.
and now all of a sudden it's
I
Houston's
do remember that.
division, and they're running away with it. So, and I feel like a lot of Colts fans too are losing sight of like keeping our own guys, keeping our core guys, because you've watched NFL for years. A lot of that doesn't happen,
Yeah.
especially in this salary cap era. Like
Oh yeah.
everyone, like we
Makes it
got all of
crazy.
our guys back, plus we're getting our franchise quarterback back, and essentially we're going to try to build around him in the draft. So it's like, let's just all relax, okay?
So what's the
You
prediction?
still got to
Are they
play.
gonna make are they gonna make the playoffs?
They're going to make the playoffs. If
Okay.
Anthony Richardson, I'll put a little asterisk in there. If Anthony Richardson plays a full healthy season, they're in it, because if he did last season, I don't think it would have came down to that last week.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're
So,
right. Even though Minshew's a pretty good backup, but
oh,
I'll
he's
come
solid.
back to you later in the year, and we will definitely revisit the NFL season, whether on this podcast or yours. So,
Okay,
um,
I'm all
anyway,
for it, Andy.
yeah, cool. So, I appreciate you bearing with. I think it was again the point of this podcast is to talk to different people, and it may include people like yourself who's not hardcore following these things, and I can understand it because there's a lot of
Oh
days where
yeah.
I look at this stuff and it's like, man, this is just too. This just sucks.
Yeah, I got
You
my
know.
blinders on, Andy. I can still hear a little bit. You know what I mean? But I got my
I know.
blinders on.
I won't harass you. I won't harass you any further. But thanks for being on. I appreciate it very much. And hopefully we'll do this again sometimes. I think next week Rich will be back. So
Yes,
and
sir.
for the time being, we'll finish out this episode by heading to our final section, which we call the reboot. So we started off talking again, just as a reminder to bring it back to the original conversation, was about whether the liberal media struggles to reach regular Americans. And we talked through the Ronna McDaniel circumstance in that whole situation. And I've talked a little bit more, including with a little bit of football talk sprinkled in there with my friend Tank, about just think MSNBC maybe didn't do the right thing here. Can't be 100% sure, but my opinion is that maybe they should have handled it a little bit differently. And part of that is an overarching thought or guidance. It's a biblical reference, and it says, "To those whom much is given, much is required." I understand that MSNBC and NBC personalities are in their jobs to secure higher viewership for their employer. Still, I believe it is incumbent upon them to fill a critical civic role in our society. After all lying to us, it is a prime directive to fill a civic role by getting Americans out of their media bubbles and talking again. This includes talking to those with whom you do not agree. Among those who have secured a big microphone in our world, such as personalities at MSNBC, it would seem to be a commonly held belief that our democracy is damaged by the media silos we occupy. Bridging the gap in our divided country is of great importance. Therefore, one might conclude that it would be incumbent upon such influential persons to be the bigger person and seek out regular conversations with Ronna McDaniel rather than suggesting their own ethical superiority empowers them to limit alternative views. This should be especially true when such views are shared by millions in this country. And besides, Fox News has been kicking MSNBC's ass in ratings for years. So maybe it is in the best interests of their jobs at MSNBC as well. That's the end of this week's podcast. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Again, visit us at our website, www.lyingtous.com. There you can find copies of other of our podcasts, and you can find the blogs that are the basis of this and other podcasts. Thanks so much for your attention. We'll see you next time.